I was the black sheep who wasted my life traveling, until my travel blog made more than all their corporate salaries combined. For 18 years, family dinners were performances where I played the disappointment. Dad would carve the roast while announcing my brother Maximiliano's latest promotion. Regional director at 28, he'd beam, knife slicing through meat like my self-esteem. Mom would pass the potatoes with that look, part pity, part embarrassment. Evangeline's exploring again, she'd explain to relatives, as if wandering through Patagonian villages was some kind of mental illness. My sister Persephone perfected the art of sympathetic concern. It's wonderful that you're following your passion, she'd say, voice dripping with condescension. But don't you want stability eventually? Uncle Thaddeus was more direct. You're 31 years old. Time to stop playing dress-up in foreign countries and get serious about your future. They had their lives mapped out. Mortgage payments, retirement plans, annual performance reviews. I had a blog called Wandering Souls that I updated from internet cafes in remote corners of the world. While they climbed corporate hierarchies, I climbed actual mountains, documenting indigenous communities before modernization erased them forever. This hobby of yours, Dad would sigh during video calls from my latest destination. When does it become a career? It already is, I'd reply, but they never listened. Last Christmas, everything changed. I flew home from 3 months in remote villages of Myanmar, exhausted but carrying news that would rewrite every family dinner conversation for the rest of our lives. The usual suspects gathered around Mom's perfectly set table. Maximiliano announced his corner office upgrade. Persephone showed off her new diamond earrings, a bonus for closing some corporate deal. Then all eyes turned to me, the eternal question mark in designer clothes. Any job prospects? Uncle Thaddeus asked, already knowing the answer would disappoint him. I pulled out my phone, fingers trembling slightly as I opened the email I'd been saving for this exact moment. Actually, I got some interesting news while I was away, I said, voice steady despite my racing heart. Persephone smirked. Let me guess, another travel opportunity? Penguin Random House wants to publish my travel memoirs, I said quietly. They're offering $1.2 million for a 3-book deal. The silence that followed was deafening. Maximiliano's wine glass stopped halfway to his lips. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. That's impossible, Dad whispered. I scrolled to my bank app, showing them the advance payment that had cleared yesterday. The documentary rights sold to HBO for another $800,000. Uncle Thaddeus leaned forward, squinting at my screen like it might be fake. How many people read this blog of yours? 3.7 million subscribers, I said. Monthly revenue averages $45,000 from sponsorships alone. The revelation hit like an avalanche. My hobby had quietly become an empire while they were busy pitying my unconventional choices. Persephone pulled out her own phone, frantically Googling my blog name. Her face went progressively paler as the numbers loaded. Jesus, she breathed. You make more in a month than I do all year. But then Dad's expression shifted from shock to something darker, fear. Evangeline, he said, voice barely audible. There's something we need to discuss about your travels. Something dangerous you've stumbled into. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mom set down her wine glass with shaking hands. Uncle Thaddeus suddenly looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. What are you talking about? I asked, though something cold was already settling in my stomach. Dad glanced around the table, then back at me. Not here. We need privacy. Whatever you have to say, you can say it in front of everyone, I said firmly. I'm done with family secrets. He ran a hand through his graying hair. The Myanmar trip. You mentioned visiting villages near the Thai border. Remote places. My blood froze. Those villages had been off most tourist maps. I'd only found them through local guides who'd sworn me to secrecy about their locations. How do you know about that? I whispered. Because we've been tracking your movements for years, Mom said quietly, her voice breaking. We had to, for your safety. The admission hung in the air like poison gas. Maximiliano and Persephone looked as shocked as I felt. Tracking me? I repeated, my success suddenly feeling hollow. You've been spying on your own daughter? It's not what you think, Dad said desperately. We weren't trying to control you. We were trying to protect you. From what? Uncle Thaddeus cleared his throat. From the same people who killed your grandfather. My world tilted. Grandfather had died when I was 12. Heart attack, they'd told me. Sudden and unexpected. Grandfather died of natural causes, I said slowly. No, Mom whispered, tears streaming down her face. He was murdered because he got too close to something he shouldn't have seen. Dad stood up, pacing to the window. Your grandfather wasn't just a businessman, Evangeline. He was a whistleblower. He'd discovered a human trafficking network operating through remote villages across Southeast Asia. He was documenting it, preparing to expose everything. The room spun. That's impossible. Grandfather sold insurance. That was his cover, Uncle Thaddeus said grimly. He worked with international law enforcement using his business travels to investigate suspicious activities in isolated communities. And you think I've somehow— I couldn't finish the sentence. Your blog posts, Persephone said suddenly, pulling up my website on her phone. You've been to 17 of the 23 villages grandfather identified as trafficking hubs. My hands went numb. I've been following humanitarian leads, places where traditional ways of life were being disrupted. I thought I was documenting cultural preservation. You were, Dad said, but you were also documenting evidence of modern slavery without realizing it. Mom pulled out a folder I hadn't noticed before. Inside were printouts of my blog posts, my photos, annotated with notes in handwriting I didn't recognize. 3 weeks after you posted about the village of Kalau in Myanmar, authorities raided it and found 47 victims of human trafficking, she said. Your documentation of unusual security measures and restricted areas helped them build the case. I stared at the papers. Photos I'd taken of what I thought were traditional buildings were circled in red ink. My notes about community helpers who seemed nervous around outsiders were highlighted. That's That's good, right? I said weakly. If my work helped save people, it is good, Uncle Thaddeus said. But it's also made you a target. The same network that killed your grandfather knows you're connecting the dots. Dad returned to his seat, looking older than I'd ever seen him. We've had private security monitoring your movements for 6 years. Every time you posted about a new location, we'd alert the appropriate authorities. You've helped shut down 11 trafficking operations across 4 countries. Without knowing it, I breathed. We wanted to tell you, Mom said desperately, but we knew you'd insist on getting more involved. You'd put yourself in direct danger. So instead, you let me think you were ashamed of me? The silence that followed was deafening. We were protecting you the only way we knew how, Dad said finally, by keeping you ignorant of how important your work really was. I stood up so fast my chair fell backward. You let me feel like a failure for 18 years to protect me from something I didn't even know existed? We thought if we could just guide you away from the most dangerous areas? Mom's voice trailed off. Is that why you always pushed so hard for me to get a real job? I asked. Why you made me feel worthless for following my passion? We hoped you'd choose something safer, Dad admitted. We never imagined your blog would become so influential, or that you'd inadvertently become one of the most effective anti-trafficking investigators in the world. The irony was staggering. While my family criticized my choices, I'd been accidentally doing exactly what my grandfather had died trying to accomplish. There's more, Uncle Thaddeus said grimly. Yesterday, we received intelligence that suggests they've identified you. Your real name, your family connections, everything. My blood turned to ice. What kind of intelligence? Dad pulled out his phone, showing me a photo that made my knees buckle. It was me, taken from a distance with a telephoto lens, walking through the village in Myanmar where I'd spent my last week. This was uploaded to a dark web forum 3 days ago, he said, along with your home address, your family members' names, and a bounty. A bounty? Persephone whispered. $50,000 for information leading to your location, Uncle Thaddeus said. $200,000 for permanent resolution of the problem. The weight of everything crashed down on me. My success, my vindication, my moment of triumph, all of it was built on a foundation of lies and danger I'd never seen coming. So what now? I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Do I stop traveling? Stop blogging? Let them win? We've been preparing for this possibility, Dad said. There's a safe house in Colorado, remote, secure. You could continue your work from there. Focus on writing your books. Hiding, I said flatly. Surviving, Mom corrected, until law enforcement can take down the rest of the network. I looked around the table at these people who'd let me believe I was a disappointment while secretly orchestrating my protection. The betrayal and gratitude warred in my chest. How long have you known this day would come? I asked. Since you posted your first blog entry from Cambodia 7 years ago, Uncle Thaddeus admitted. You described a village that matched one of your grandfather's investigations perfectly. We knew then that somehow you'd inherited his instinct for finding these places. And you never thought to just tell me? We consulted with FBI behavioral specialists, Dad said. They said telling you would likely make you more reckless, not less, that you'd feel obligated to deliberately seek out dangerous situations. He wasn't wrong. Even now, knowing the truth, part of me wanted to book the next flight back to Southeast Asia and start investigating properly. There's something else, Mom said quietly. She pulled out another folder, thicker than the first. We've been documenting everything. Your grandfather's investigation, your accidental discoveries, the raids that followed. We've built a case that could take down the entire network. We? I asked. Your father has been working with international law enforcement for 12 years, Uncle Thaddeus said. Ever since your grandfather was killed, everything we've done, every move we've made has been building toward this moment. The room spun again. Dad's not really in insurance either? I am, he said, but I'm also a consultant for Interpol. Have been since you were in college. Jesus, Maximiliano breathed. Our whole family is living a lie. Not a lie, Mom said firmly. A cover. We've been protecting not just Evangeline, but all of you. These people don't hesitate to target families. I sank back into my chair, mind reeling. So my blog, my success, my whole career, it's all been part of some undercover operation? No, Dad said emphatically. Your talent, your writing, your ability to connect with people, that's all you. We never influenced your content or directed your travels. We just monitored the aftermath and occasionally tipped off authorities when your posts revealed something significant, Uncle Thaddeus added. I thought about all the remote villages I'd visited, all the stories I'd told. How many lives had been saved because of photos I'd taken without understanding their significance? How many victims had been freed because I documented the wrong thing at the right time? The Myanmar trip, I said slowly. Something happened there. Something that made this urgent. Dad nodded grimly. You photographed a man who's been on Interpol's most wanted list for 8 years, posted his face to 3.7 million followers without realizing who he was. My mouth went dry. The village elder who showed me around? Tong Sain, also known as the Ghost of the Golden Triangle. He runs the largest human trafficking operation in Southeast Asia. I remembered the man. Friendly, articulate, spoke perfect English. He'd insisted on personally guiding me through the village, even posed for photos with some of the children. He seemed so normal, I whispered. The best predators always do, Mom said. But your blog post led to his identification and arrest. He was captured 2 days ago, which is why they're coming for you now, Uncle Thaddeus added. You've cost them their leader and millions in revenue. The magnitude of it all overwhelmed me. While I'd been proudly announcing my book deal, dangerous people were planning my murder. What happens to my blog? I asked. My followers? We've prepared a statement, Dad said. You're taking a temporary hiatus for a family emergency. Your content will remain online, but you'll stop posting new material until the network is dismantled. How long will that take? Could be months, could be years. I stared at my phone, at the app that had connected me to millions of people around the world. My entire identity was wrapped up in sharing stories, in bringing hidden corners of the world to light. There is another option, Uncle Thaddeus said carefully. I'm listening. You could work with us officially. Use your platform to help authorities target remaining cells. Your followers trust you. They'd believe anything you posted. You mean become bait. I mean become a partner, Dad corrected. Help us finish what your grandfather started. The idea was terrifying and exhilarating. Instead of accidentally stumbling onto trafficking operations, I could deliberately hunt them down. It would be incredibly dangerous, Mom said, reading my expression. These people have already killed for less. But think about the impact, Persephone said suddenly. We all turned to look at her. Evangeline, you have 3.7 million followers. If you could direct their attention to specific issues, specific locations, crowdsourced investigation, Maximiliano added, catching on, your audience could help identify suspicious activities, provide tips. Absolutely not, Dad said firmly. We're not putting civilians at risk. We wouldn't have to, I said, my mind racing. I could frame it as cultural documentation. Ask followers to help identify traditional practices that seem out of place, buildings that don't match local architecture, communities where photography is restricted. People love participating in mysteries, Persephone said excitedly. You could gamify it. Make it feel like a treasure hunt instead of an investigation. Uncle Thaddeus was nodding slowly. It could work. Use the blog as a front for intelligence gathering. No, Mom said desperately. It's too dangerous. If they realize what she's doing, they already know what I'm doing, I pointed out. At least this way, I'd be doing it on purpose. Dad was quiet for a long time, staring at the photos spread across the table. Finally, he looked up at me. If you do this, there's no going back. Your life as you know it would be over. You'd always be looking over your shoulder. I've been looking over my shoulder for 6 years without knowing it, I said. At least now I'd know why. And if something happens to you? I thought about the children in those villages, the young women who'd looked at me with haunted eyes while their captors smiled and posed for pictures. Then I'll have died trying to finish what grandfather started. The decision crystallized in that moment. I'd spent my entire adult life feeling like a disappointment, like my choices were selfish and meaningless. Now I knew the truth. I'd been making a difference all along, just not the way I'd imagined. I'll need training, I said. Real training. If I'm going to do this properly, I need to know what to look for, how to document evidence, how to stay safe. That can be arranged, Uncle Thaddeus said. There's a facility in Virginia where they train deep cover operatives. And my blog? We'll help you develop new content strategies, Dad said. Posts that appear to be cultural documentation, but actually serve investigative purposes. My audience will notice if my writing style changes dramatically. So we'll transition gradually, Persephone suggested. Start with posts about historical mysteries, unsolved disappearances. Get your followers used to participating in investigations. I looked around the table at my family, my complicated, secretive, protective family who'd let me hate them to keep me safe. One condition, I said. Name it, Dad replied. No more lies. If I'm doing this, we do it as a team. Complete transparency from now on. Mom started crying again. You could have a normal life. You could settle down, be safe. I could, I agreed. But I won't. Not when I know what's out there. Dad reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Your grandfather would be proud. I hope so. Uncle Thaddeus was already making phone calls, arranging meetings with people whose names I couldn't catch. Maximiliano and Persephone were looking at me with expressions I'd never seen before. Respect. Maybe even admiration. There's one more thing, Dad said as the evening wound down. The publishing deal? The HBO contract? You'll need to be careful about how you handle that money. Why? Sudden wealth makes you a target in new ways. And if you're working with law enforcement, your finances will be scrutinized. Are you suggesting I turn down the deals? I'm suggesting you be strategic about them. Maybe structure the payments differently, funnel some of the money toward anti-trafficking organizations. The irony wasn't lost on me. My success story was becoming something completely different from what I'd imagined when I walked into dinner tonight. When do we start? I asked. The training program begins next month, Uncle Thaddeus said, hanging up his phone. But first we need to get you somewhere safe. The safe house in Colorado? For now, until we can assess the immediate threat level. I thought about my apartment in Portland, my plants, my cat Hemingway, my normal life that apparently hadn't been normal at all. How long do I have to pack? We leave tonight, Dad said. A team is already at your apartment securing your essential belongings. Hemingway? Already en route to Colorado, Mom said with a small smile. We know how much you love that cat. Despite everything, I laughed. Even in their deception, they'd known me well enough to prioritize my pet's safety. So what now? I asked. Do I just disappear? My followers will want to know what happened. We've prepared a statement, Persephone said, pulling out her phone. Family medical emergency requiring extended leave. You'll post it tomorrow morning from the safe house. I read the draft she showed me. It was perfect. Vague enough to avoid questions, specific enough to seem genuine. And after that, you become the most dangerous travel blogger in the world, Uncle Thaddeus said, with something that might have been pride. You just won't advertise that fact. As we cleared the dinner table, I felt the weight of my old life lifting away. The family dynamics that had defined us for so long were shifting into something new, something honest. I'm sorry, Dad said quietly as we loaded the dishwasher, for letting you think we were disappointed. I'm sorry too, I replied, for thinking you didn't understand. We understood better than you knew, Mom said, joining us. We just couldn't tell you why. Later that night, as I packed my emergency bag one more time, I thought about all the places I'd been, all the stories I'd told. In a few hours, I'd be starting a new chapter. One where my wandering would have a purpose I'd never imagined. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Looking forward to working with you. Your grandfather would be proud. Agent Morrison. I smiled and typed back, ready when you are. 3 months later, I was in a compound in Virginia, learning how to spot surveillance, identify trafficking indicators, and document evidence without appearing suspicious. My fellow trainees were career law enforcement officers, military veterans, intelligence analysts. I was the only travel blogger in the group. Your cover is actually perfect, Agent Morrison told me during our first one-on-one session. Journalists and bloggers have legitimate reasons to ask questions, take photos, visit remote locations. You'll be able to go places our traditional operatives can't. What makes you think I can handle this? Because you've already been handling it for 7 years, she said. You just didn't know it. The training was grueling. Physical fitness, defensive tactics, surveillance techniques, cultural intelligence, emergency medical training. But the most challenging part was learning to see the world differently. Human trafficking hides in plain sight, my instructor explained as we reviewed case studies. Victims are often displayed as willing participants. Communities are often complicit, either through fear or economic dependence. I thought about all the villages I'd visited, all the smiling faces that had welcomed me. How many of those smiles had been forced? How many of those communities had been built on suffering I'd been too naive to recognize? The key is learning to trust your instincts, Agent Morrison said. You've already proven you have them. Now we're just going to sharpen them. By the end of the 3-month program, I could identify potential trafficking situations from subtle behavioral cues, document evidence using covert photography techniques, and communicate with law enforcement using coded language that would seem innocent to casual observers. Your new blog strategy, Agent Morrison explained during our final briefing, will focus on responsible tourism. You'll be educating your followers about how to travel ethically, how to recognize and report suspicious activities, how to ensure their tourism dollars aren't supporting harmful practices. And in the process, you'll be building the world's largest crowdsourced anti-trafficking network. The first post in my new series went live 6 months after that Christmas dinner that changed everything. Traveling with purpose, how to ensure your adventures make a positive impact. The response was overwhelming. My followers were eager to learn, eager to help, eager to be part of something meaningful. Within weeks, I was receiving dozens of tips from travelers who'd spotted suspicious activities in various locations. This is incredible, Dad said during one of our weekly check-ins. You've essentially deputized 3.7 million people. 4.2 million, I corrected. The subscriber count keeps growing. My book tour became a recruitment tool. At every reading, every interview, I'd talk about responsible travel and encourage people to be aware of their surroundings. I never mentioned trafficking directly, but the message was clear. 1 year after my training, I received a message that made everything worthwhile. Thanks to a tip from one of your followers, we were able to rescue 43 victims from a trafficking operation in Cambodia. Your work is saving lives. Agent Morrison, my family had been right about one thing. My life would never be normal again. But it was better than normal. It was meaningful in ways I'd never imagined possible. The irony of it all still amazed me. For years, they'd made me feel like my choices were selfish and frivolous. Now, those same choices were the foundation of one of the most effective anti-trafficking operations in the world. I have a confession, Mom said during our most recent family dinner. I've been reading your blog religiously for 7 years. I know, I said. You've been subscribed since day one. Username, ProudMom47. She looked shocked. You knew. I've always known. You liked every single post within minutes of publication, even the ones about remote villages with terrible internet connections. We've all been following along, Maximiliano admitted, even when we were pretending to disapprove, especially then, Persephone added. We were so proud of you, but we couldn't show it. Dad cleared his throat. Speaking of confessions, there's something else you should know. My stomach dropped. After everything we'd been through, I wasn't sure I could handle another family secret. What now? The publishing deal, the HBO contract, we might have had some influence there. What kind of influence? The kind where your father knows people in the entertainment industry through his law enforcement contacts, Uncle Thaddeus said carefully. I stared at them. You're telling me my success was orchestrated? Not orchestrated, Dad said quickly. Facilitated. Your work was already exceptional. We just made sure the right people saw it. The blog's success was all you, Mom added. We never interfered with that. But when opportunities arose to amplify your platform, you pushed things along. We helped, Persephone corrected, because we believed in you, even when you thought we didn't. I should have been angry. Another deception, another manipulation, but instead I felt something else. Gratitude. Thank you, I said quietly. For lying to you again? Dad asked, confused. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. As I looked around the table at my complicated, protective, secretive family, I realized that everything had worked out exactly as it was supposed to. My wandering had led me home, not to a place, but to a purpose. My phone buzzed with another message from Agent Morrison. New intelligence suggests a major operation in northern Thailand. Interested in planning a cultural documentation trip? I smiled and typed back, always. Because that's what I did now. I wandered with purpose, documenting cultures and saving lives, one blog post at a time. And for the first time in my life, my family was proud to tell people exactly what I did for a living, even if they couldn't tell them why.